Well, good morning. February 9th, 2020. I've said some of these things before in my whole story. It's over 12 hours long now. This is about Marsha and I. Her name was Marsha, born in Tomahawk, Alberta, 1931, July 12th, they think. They didn't keep too good of records back then. Her parents came from Ukraine, Steppenville, I think it was called. After Stalin took over Ukraine, they took over everybody's farms and took them away from them, nationalized all the farms, and so they took a boat over. Irene was born already, and Robert was born, I think, and they took a boat over to a ship over from Europe over to Montreal, and then they took a train over to probably Calgary and or Edmonton, and then they had to they got this piece of homesteaded land, and her parents were named Thomas and Julia, and they got to this piece of land, and it was like all wooded and everything. They had to start out and clear the land. Marsha said he used to butcher a pig and bury it in the ground in the summer, I guess, with sawdust and ice from the winter. And, they ended up having 8 kids. They had Marsha, they had, Robert, Irene, Mary, Anne, John, Paul, and Marsha. And so Marsha was the first one born in Canada, and it was a tough life. I wish I had some pictures of when she was very little. She used to tell me about her uncle used to chase her around. She told me also that the doctor that delivered her had told her parents she was the most beautiful baby that he'd ever delivered. And I can believe that, because as she got older, and she's 88 going 89 now, and she's still beautiful. Even if all her teeth fell out, she'd be beautiful. Her bone structure is so nice, and her skin is smooth as a baby, Even the girls that are at the care home where Marsha is now say the same thing, And they homesteaded, and out there, I know Marsha told me one time she saved Irene's life in the winter when it was so cold in Alberta. Irene, they had to walk a long ways to school, and Irene kept wanting to lay down in the snow and have a sleep, Marsha kept making her get up. Irene's always crabby. They never got along too good, Irene and Marsha. I think Irene was always jealous of Marsha because she was so cute and good looking, and even nowadays it's like you go to see Irene. Hi, Irene. She goes, hello, goodbye. Sometimes she can be funny, though. So, I don't know, we had him over for Christmas once, and we made all this food. And I made all this French-Canadian dinner for Ivan, Irene's husband, and tortilla pie and roasted vegetables and a maple syrup pie for dessert. And so then when we went over for their place they said, come over for Christmas dinner. We went over there about 3 o'clock when they told us to come, and they said, oh, well, we had our dinner at lunchtime with the boys. There's leftovers in the fridge. Help yourself. Then they drank our wine, and they had a crappy-looking, cheap Christmas tree, blue thing. So I don't know. We never really hung out with them too much. So anyway, Marsha was... she was born up in Tomahawk and lived around Highvale on a farm. And I don't know that much more about her early days, except she came to Vancouver and got an apartment with Irene in the West End. She showed me that building once, and she got a job at the stock exchange marking the board when it was done by chalk, Vancouver had a stock exchange down in Howe, I think it was Hornby or Howe, in the downtown part, So she lived in the West End. I bet the boys looked at her when she was marking the board. Man, she's a beautiful girl. I've got a picture of her walking down Granville when she was young. Gee, I'm a lucky guy to ever meet her. And she was marking the board, and then there was a guy that either worked at the stock exchange or something, and she met his son, who was Bill Patterson, and I guess they started dating or something. I don't know how long they went out together. Apparently he was kind of a funny guy. He could play piano too, and he drank heavy, but they ended up getting married and living in Richmond. And then they had 2 children, Lynn and Patricia. And then what happened is he got transferred down to, they were either going to go to New York or Los Angeles. I'm not sure what he sold, but they went down to Los Angeles and they bought a house on Farallone. And they only were down there a few years when Bill drank heavy. I don't know if it's true. Marsha said he broke her arm once, but Marsha could get pretty haywire drinking too, so I don't know. Who knows what went on. But I don't know if Bill was mean to her. I don't think he was, but I don't know. I know Marsha pretty good, but I know he caught the Patty. Patty was a haywire one. She was doing drugs and starting to do drugs. I remember they said he caught her once and got mad at her. But when they were young teenagers, Marsha, I don't know if Marsha was, it was his birthday, and Marsha was going to go out shopping, and he said he didn't feel too good, and so he went out to shop, and she went out to shop, and when she came home, he was laying dead on the floor. He had a heart attack, and she said it was the worst thing in her whole life she ever had to do was tell her children that he died. And then she told me a story once that he actually said goodbye to her. She's seen his face or something in the clouds or in a vision, or she said it was him. He'd come to say goodbye, and I guess I believe in those things. Those things can happen. She said she's seen him in the clouds, and he said goodbye. And anyway, she got a job at J.C. Penney down in Northridge, California, and raised her 2 daughters down there through their teenage years and everything. And Patty met a guy named Harry and married him. And Lynn married Craig. And then Lynn had Hannah and Jonathan, 2 children. And so anyway, Patty never had any children. She was married to Harry. And then they broke up. Harry moved out to Denver, around Denver somewhere. And he had Bill's pool table. Marsha was always mad about that. She got on the phone one night. She was going at him, and he called her a witch. Anyway, he came to our wedding, Harry did. But Patty eventually, she gave Patty her Wildcat car, and Patty was so irresponsible, she left it on the freeway somewhere, abandoned it. It was like a real nice car. And then Lynn told me in later years Patty was drinking real heavy, and she met some guy, and she was living in this guy's basement, some guy's rich guy, but she wasn't allowed to go upstairs, and he was just using her for a sex toy and everything. And then I think she got some kind of liver problems or something and died because she wasn't that old. That's why Lynn's so against drinking, while her father drank heavy, you see. So anyway, what happened is when I was up here playing, I've been playing singles jobs all over the place, and Marsha, I was single at the time. I'd been dating years before. After Lisa, I had met a few girls like Robin and Heather. Robin was sort of serious a bit, and then I met Julia. I was enthralled with her, but that didn't work out too good. So I'd been single for a few years, not dating anybody, and I seen this girl dancing at the Legion, at the Crescent Beach Legion when I was playing there, And I've played many, 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 many gigs, tell you. And I didn't hardly ever meet anybody really. People you meet in bars usually are not worth it. And it's when you're playing, you're busy. Marsha used to get jealous about, I took her to all my gigs anyway, but anybody that got jealous about me out playing while I'm playing, and it's not that easy to meet people. But I guess anyway, I saw her dancing out in the dance floor with some guy. He had bracers on his coat and or on his pants, like dressed kind of funny. I don't know who he was, because Marsha had come up here apparently. I don't know if it was that time or not, to meet this old boyfriend of hers. And he lived in Victoria, and he had a boat or something. I think he'd been an ex-cop or something. Lynn told me this story, and that Marsha had went out with him a couple of times, but I think he'd been divorced. He was tied up. It just didn't work, You can't really go back. I tried that once too, and I didn't try it, but I just know it doesn't work. So anyway, she'd gone and seen him, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if that was the guy she was dancing with, but I saw her dancing, and the way she moved, and her blonde hair, and just her facial features, like she looked, Russian, and that's always sort of been my favorite kind of, Scottish or Russian, like light-skinned like that. And the way she danced with her arms out was so unique. I mean, I've seen a lot of people dance, and I thought, wow, look at that one dancing. And I thought, gee, boy, is she ever great. What a beautiful girl. And so I'm watching her all the time she's playing, and years later she said, I seen that guy up on that stage watching me with those glassy eyes. That was me. Anyway, I thought, I got to go and find out who she is, and so I'm playing my set, and then all of a sudden she's gone. She left. And I thought, oh, damn it, anyway. And so I went down and after my set, and I started asking everybody, do you know who that one here was dancing? And people hadn't been paying much attention. I guess they said, I don't know who that was. What blonde, I said, that one that was dancing so neat out there, that was so beautiful. And nobody knew who she was. Now, Irene and Ivan were probably there that night, but I'd had a run-in with them a long time or before that at one time. Of course, Irene's crabby, and there was a Chinese couple that came down, wanted me to play a tango, and I didn't know how to play a tango, so I went and got a recorder and was playing it through my PA, and Irene sent Ivan up to say, it's too loud, and I sort of told him off, so I never talked to them. So, Irene was even president of that legion at one time, and so I went back about. I asked everybody that night, all the bartender, the waitresses, nobody knew who she was, Marsha. And I went back there about 3 or 4 times during the next year, playing there. And every time I went there, I asked, sip of my coffee here. I asked everybody if they remembered her. People I hadn't seen before or asked before, and nobody could remember who she was. And so after a whole year went by, I was thinking, I guess that's too bad, I kept thinking about her the whole year. And so all of a sudden I look out there one time when I'm playing there she is sitting there with her girlfriend, Norma. And I thought, oh my God, she's back. And so I couldn't wait to get off the stage. So I finished my set a little bit early. And I went down and I said, where have you been? I said, I've been looking for you for a whole year. And she remembered me, and we sort of hit it off right away. I think I kissed her on the cheek, and then I sat down. We were so excited to be together. It was unbelievable. And I guess she'd been thinking about me too. I don't know. I hope so. Anyway, we held hands and we were touching our feet under the table. And Norma, her girlfriend, said to her, don't do that. I think you're fresh or something. But we were so attracted to each other. It was unbelievable. And we just wanted to hold each other and talk and hug and kiss and everything. So then I walked her to the car, and she had the T-Bird that she just brought up, and I kissed her goodnight and gave her nice hugs, and we exchanged numbers, and she gave me her number, and I said, well, do you want to go out and we do something together? I wasn't drinking at the time, so I said, well, I'll phone you in the morning. So I phoned her in the morning, and she said, why don't you come? Because I was living at Coon Towers then out in Surrey Central. And so she said, why don't you come out and we'll go down to Crescent Beach or something? I said, yeah, that'd be great. Come out for lunch. And so I came out to White Rock, and we went down to Crescent Beach, and there was a big, actually wasn't very big. We took a blanket with us, and there's a tree down there near the parking lot on the lawn, and so we went down, put a blanket down, and I think we had 2 blankets. Anyway, we laid on the thing and talked and actually hugged, and it was a little bit, I think we put the blanket away. It was so good to actually put our arms around each other, and then we were alone, and so then we got in the car and came back to the house for lunch, and she made bacon and tomato sandwiches, and we went and sat on the couch and kissed and hugged and did all that kind of stuff, and then we didn't really make love or nothing, but we started going out together quite a bit, and I think we did sort of try to make love a little bit once, and I don't know what it was, but I sort of backed off because I thought, gee, I wonder if I shouldn't push so much or something on her, and so I kind of, we just were getting to know each other, even though we wanted to be with each other. She went away for 3 weeks or a couple of weeks or something, and we didn't see each other anyway after the first date. We were so excited on the first date. I think whatever, too soon. Anyway, she said, "Oh, we got forever, Or maybe that was the second date. I can't remember. We got lots of time. Don't worry about it." And I was too excited. That's all. You can't help it. But anyway, she went away, and that was when Patty died. Patty died, and I feel so terrible that I wasn't with Marsha when Patty died, because now that I've been with her for many years, it hurts my heart that I wasn't with her. And she was away, and then she came back, and I guess after 2 or 3 weeks, I phoned her, or she phoned me or something, and we started talking again. We couldn't stand to be apart, and then we started phoning each other, 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, and talking on the phone, and then we started going out again together, and I would come out to see her, and we'd go out and have lunch and stuff like that, and then we started sleeping together, of course, and she'd come into my place at Coon Towers and stay there with me once in a while, and now we go out and do stuff. We used to go walking down the beach and looking for rocks, and we had a lot of fun together. And I remember one time I tried to come out. It was winter time, and it started to snow, and I had an old station wagon. And no, I had my 64 Chrysler. It was a nice car. And I got into it, and I started down King George. I had a bottle of wine. I guess we'd started drinking by then again. But I had a bottle of wine with me, and I'm getting down King George, and I got down to about, I don't know, 88th or 80th Avenue on King George, coming from Surrey Central, and the snow got so bad, worse and worse and worse. That car was just awful in the snow, and I thought, geez, if I get to down to King George, where you have to go down that big hill to the flats, I'll slip out and end up in the ditch, and I'll never get out there. So I turned around and made it back partway home, and I had to put the car on. I was off King George, but I had to, sort of ram the car into the snowbank and then walk the rest of the way home with my bottle of wine. So then I phoned her up. I guess I drank the wine, And then she came over to Coon Towers one Christmas, probably the same year, I don't know. They had a Christmas party there, and I volunteered to play for nothing. And so Marsha came with me, stayed overnight. We were having drinks by then, but we went down there. I played, and they had this buffet. Came in, and Marsha told me there was a girl there. She brought this little box with her, and she kept going back, getting more food and sticking it in the box to take upstairs. They're quite the crew in that Coon Towers, I'm telling you. That was an interesting place. But Marsha was really down to earth, And when we first started dating, and I took her to the church. We weren't drinking. Sometimes we drank, sometimes we didn't. I started getting an indication on her drinking thing. I'm no angel at drinking either, believe me. It seems like everybody lots of times I end up in, fighting with people. People get owly when they drink. Not me so much, though, but I don't think I do anyway. But my sister never liked it when I drank because I always called her Donna. She said, "You've been drinking, haven't you?" But I've had a lot of fun drinking, too. But me and Marsha did, too. But a couple of times when we were first dating, I noticed she kind of flipped out when we were drinking. And then the next day when I phoned her, she always said, "Oh, geez, I'm sorry. I did that, And so I kind of let it go, But usually if you get an inkling of something, it's the truth, So anyway, when we weren't drinking, I took her. I couldn't wait. When she told me about her dad being, reading the Bible every morning and being such a religious guy, he sort of used to be minister to people up around Highville. Excuse me, I couldn't wait to take her to this church. When I came back off the ships and was sort of in recovery from too much drinking and everything and depression, I tried to go to AA, and I hated it. All these people sitting around talking about how much they used to drink. They all used to smoke and, a bunch of, I don't know. And then, they say, believe in a higher power, even if it's a rock or, I don't know. It just didn't wash with me. So I tried a bunch of different churches, and even with years before. And then I found this church, I think actually about four or 5 years ago, when I'd been dating Julia. We went to these different churches. She used to act like she was religious, but she really wasn't. And then she took me to this church in New Westminster, and it was the Emmanuel Pentecostal Church. And I went in there, and I fell right in love with that church because it was so old-fashioned. It was a really nice old brick church built in 1859, and the minister was so great. And Pastor Reynolds, he was such a strong minister and told the truth so good. And Sister Newsham was there. Sister Crandall also, who was a matriarch of the church, that she sort of took me under her wing. And I'd broken up with Julie a long time ago, and I'd gone to that church for years after. And the church was, it was like a really good church. They even offered me an apartment once if I wanted one. But I thought, I don't know, because once you get in that church, you're in there forever, and it's like a full-time job. But Sister Crandall, I sort of visited her up until the night she died. She was very old, and I wrote a song called The Greatest Song of All is a song about Jesus, and I sang it to her before she died. And then Sister Newsham, she was an old Alberta lady that I told this story before. She used to sing hymns to the cows, and she'd read the Bible in the outhouse because her family wasn't religious. She was always mad because one of her sisters or her sons was a Jehovah's Witness that she didn't believe in. But anyway, I took Marsha to that church, and I knew she'd love it, and Marsha fell in love with that church too. So we started going all the time. And then we'd we'd go on, take holidays together a little bit and stuff, and do a few things like that. She had the T-Bird. She used to drive out to Coon Towers, and I was still living there, and so we attended church pretty steady, and we didn't drink at the time. We used to drink for a bit, and then we'd quit for a bit, and then we actually decided we'd get baptized. Marsha said she'd never been baptized, so, and I don't know if she had or not, but I'd never been baptized, so we went there, we studied up, and, they like you to speak in tongues in that church, but I never did. Neither did Marsha. Marsha told me her dad used to, though, but I used to, I wrote down a bunch of stuff in case I would, but not pretend. I can't pretend things, so I wrote things that, when you're praising the Lord, praise the Lord, oh, hallelujah, and all that, then when we went to get baptized, Sister Newsham was Marsha's partner, and I had this brother, what's his name? Brother Hobson or Brother Hobson or something his name was. He's a big, sort of a fat guy, and he got his arms on me, They always put their hand on you, and then they shake your hand like trying to get you going to start talking in tongues, because they, that's what they think at that church. When you start talking in tongues, oh, he's got the Holy Spirit. Well, I can't fake something like that. It's got to be real, So I don't know. I just hallelujah'd and all that. Well, he did that. Jobson, that's his name, Brother Jobson. Anyway, Pastor Reynolds' son, I liked him, Steve. He was kind of a nice guy. Me and Marsha went to a Bible study with this guy, another Stephen Vindy. For a while, we went to their house at night and studied the Bible. And anyway, we got baptized and went up, and she had a nightie on or something. I had sort of, fuzzies and an old shirt on or something. I can't remember. And we went down, and they got in the tank, and they submerged you right under in this place. And then Pastor Reynolds came and prayed over us and baptized us. So we got baptized, and then that was I don't know what summer that was. We met in 2003, I guess. Maybe that was 2004. And we went to, we decided we were going to go to Sicamous that summer on a holiday, so we went and rented a houseboat, and we were going to go up the lake together, just the two of us, not drink or nothing. But then we ended up getting, I don't know, I mentioned it to Jesse. He was going out with a girl named Leah at the time. Oh, yeah, we got to go with you. I thought, oh, God, why did I mention it? As much as I loved Jesse, but we were sort of, I knew it would happen if we went like that. It would be drinking and everything. And he always wanted to smoke a lot of dope, and I don't like smoking dope unless I drink. So I thought, what the heck, we've been straight for a couple of years. And so we went up to Sicamous, me and Marsha, and got a whole bunch of booze, and then we waited and waited. We went down to the houseboat and loaded a bunch of groceries and stuff on it. We waited and waited and waited. And finally, Jesse came up just late in the day, too. He'd slept in or some damn thing, and he'd driven up there like, I don't know, who knows how speed, 90 miles an hour. Got up there, and then he wanted to buy a bunch of steaks and all that, so we went and bought a whole bunch of steaks and got on the boat, and then went up the lake. It was lots of fun. We were all partying and having a beer, driving up, and we went up the lake and partied that night. We had a really good time. And then I think the next day we had a party on the beach and hiked around and smoked a bunch of pot and everything. And I don't know if it was the next day or the day after, but we got going way too much, way too many joints, way too many drinks. And then I don't know what happened to it. Jesse was in one room with Leah, and we were all partying together on the boat. And then everything got turned to crap, and Jesse started getting mad at us, and he called Marsha a bitch, and told me what a horrible dad I was, and that I'd hired a dancing girl once for his birthday. When he had a birthday and I was staying in a motel, I'd hired this girl one time to come over and dance around. And that was a pretty stupid thing to do, but anyway, it was innocent enough, but and he got onto my case about what a horrible dad I was, and I don't know, we all went to bed, and so I got mad in the morning and got up and drove the houseboat back. They got off the boat, and me and Marsha stayed on shore for the last day. We just stayed on shore and drank wine or whatever. Anyway, that was a disaster, that whole thing. But while we were on there, we started talking about getting married. And because we ended up that we were always, I was always coming out here to stay at her house, or she was coming into my house. We're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So, I don't know, we started talking about it and maybe think about it for a bit. And then I guess we finally decided that's a good idea because we couldn't stand to be apart. So I went and bought her a nice wedding ring or an engagement ring. I think it was about $1,500 or something like that. And then I was a little nervous because where I was living I had this apartment through BC Housing because I'd been on a disability thing part-time from being depressed and everything. So, it was like a place I could keep forever, and it was cheap rent. It was only like $400 a month or something. And so, I knew if I got married, I'd have to give up my security and put all my trust into Marsha. So anyway, we decided to get married, so we just arranged it at the church, and everybody, Pastor Reynolds married us, and it was a beautiful wedding. It's on film. It's on YouTube also, Richard and Marsha's wedding. And they put on a big party for us downstairs with all this food and everything. And Marsha's family came up, Lynn and Brian. Harry came from Colorado. We had, I think Steve and Vindy were there, Sister Newsham, Sister Terry, who's a little black lady, who's a good friend of mine from the church. And then we had, my sister came down, and Chelsea and Chris, her husband, and Jesse and Leah. And, there was a lot of people there. Ed Cerny and Jean came, his girlfriend. And then there was a couple from West Van that came over. Forget their names now offhand. If I think of it later, I'll say it. She was a haywire one. Oh, God. We met them over at the West Van Legion. She used to dance around, kicking her legs up in the air. She had no underwear on, thank God. But she was kind of a hoot. And her and this other guy, anyway, they came to the wedding too. And remember a story about, he was married, this guy, and he used to go out with this other one all the time. I heard his wife came down one time and smacked the other one. That what happens in legions anyway. So anyway, after our wedding, I drove my 64 Chevy out, or my 64 Chrysler out to Nickel here where I live now, at the golf course in White Rock, and parked my car here, and we got the T-Bird, and we went across the border, and I'd booked a room at the Skagit Hotel. It's a casino hotel down past Bellingham. And I had a bottle of German wine. We hadn't been drinking up to that time again after the summer boat. That was a year later after we'd been baptized, after that houseboat trip. But we decided we'd drink on our honeymoon, so I got a bottle of German wine, and we went down to Skagit, and we went upstairs. We had a beautiful room, and we went down, and I think we gambled a little bit, drank our bottle of nice German wine. Then we went and had steak and crab for dinner. Steak Oscar, I guess it was. And the next day we left and drove down the Oregon coast to a place called Sunnyside, where there was a motel there. And we had happened to hit there on a long weekend, which was like super busy. It was so packed there. It's a resort town, and I remember going across the big bridge at Astoria. We went down that way. They got this huge, long bridge. It's one of the longest bridges ever. And we'd gone to Astoria and then down into Sunnyside. And then, so we finally found a place right on the beach at Sunnyside that had a room. But we went in the room, and it was like a crappy room at the back of the motel. And the door was all loose. It had been jimmied or something. So Marsha said, she said, "Wow, heck with it. We're not taking that." So she phoned up the desk, and she complained. So they upgraded us and gave us a beautiful room right on the front with this big balcony overlooking the ocean. And we got pictures of her with our hands up in the air with our wedding rings on and everything. And I don't know, we sat and drank wine. We drank wine all the time on those trips. And then we went down the next day to, Lincoln City. Went through there. We ended up going down to Newport. We might have stayed overnight in Lincoln City, too. We took our time, sort of went through Tullamac, and then we ended up in Newport. We were going to go to Newport, and as we were coming toward Newport, we passed this place, and Marsha said, "Oh, look at that place we just passed. That looks like a nice place." I said, "Wow, well, let's keep going. We're just about at Newport." And then I thought, "Wow, what the heck? We're on our honeymoon. Let's turn around." So I turned around. We went back. It was called the Moolock Shores, and it's up on a sort of a cliff above this long beach. It's like a park there. There's a park next to it, and we'd stopped at this other place that had been up the mountain. It was a lookout where they were selling stuff, and it was such a nice area. There was really nothing around this motel. There's no houses or nothing very close, and so it's like sort of out in the wilderness, just before the city limits, and it was beautiful. It was an old rustic place. They even had VHS movies that you could play, and each room was done in a different theme. Like we had the Hollywood room that time. And there's all kinds of different rooms with themes in them anyway. And so we had the Hollywood room. We went in there, and there's pictures of Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe, and all this stuff. And there's a little fireplace with a fire log. And so Marsha, we started having some wine, and Frank and Yvette ran that place. I remember Yvette used to come over and drink with us in later years. But anyway, we had some wine, and we were so excited and everything. And Marsha said, "Let's go for a swim." I went, "Okay." So we gets our bathing suits on and goes down these long stairs. There's a bunch of wooden stairs, like 2 or 3 flights that go down to the ocean from the cliff. Went down there and jumped in the damn ocean. It was so freezing cold and windy. Marsha just about froze. "Oh, let's get out of here." So we went up the stairs again and got in, lit the fireplace up, and had some wine, ordered a pizza. And I think the next day we drove further down the Oregon coast. We went down that Oregon coast about 4 or 5 times and stayed at that same motel. And we stay for a week at a time sometimes. We'd go down and go to Depot Bay. We'd go to Moe's for... it's a restaurant. There's 2 or 3 of them down there. They have really great clam and chowder. We had their oysters a couple of times. Raw ones once, yuck. And fried ones once, yuck again, for me anyway. But it's nice down there, Depot Bay and all these places. So we did a lot. We went even to the Ripley's, believe it or not, in Newport and went through there. And there's all kinds of neat stuff to look at in those places. And, T-shirt shops and everything. And there used to be more trips we went down there. I remember there was a guy named Ronnie used to stay in. We started getting a place on the front of the motel with a balcony, and Ronnie would stay there. Next to us, this guy from somewhere, I forget where, but he used to go down every year, and he'd put a towel up to keep the wind off. He'd be sitting out on the balcony, and he told us about this big, huge tree that was way down somewhere down the coast. It was the biggest spruce around or something. So we went down there one day, and we went on this trail. We hiked and hiked and hiked and hiked. Marsha got so tired. She was in pretty good shape too, but we were still not there. So finally, we thought, heck with it. Marsha was getting too tired. I was getting worried about her. So I looked across the river. I seen this road. I said, there's a road across there, on the other side of the river. And then we found out later, people just drive up the other side of the river to park up there and walk across this bridge to the tree. Anyway, we should have done our homework a little bit better. And I remember one time we were down there, Yvette was Frank, the owners, Frank and Yvette. He didn't like her to drink because she liked drinking too much. And one time Ronnie put a party for us, on a party for us down there and when we were leaving. So he had all these big, huge prawns and everything that he bought fresh, and he cooked them all up. And Yvette came over, and he was mixing up margaritas, and she didn't even eat. She just kept drinking. And Frank, I don't know where he was. He didn't like her to drink anyway. But when me and Marsha went back to the room, we heard knock, knock, knock on the door, and it's Yvette. He said, "Oh, come on in, we'll give you a wine or two." And so she came in. She kept marveling about Marsha's legs, how smooth they were and nice. I remember she kept feeling Marsha's legs. She wasn't a lesbian or nothing, just that Marsha's skin is so beautiful. And then one time we went on a trip down to Jonathan's graduation, when he graduated from college or something. And we went down there, and we also went down another time for Hannah's wedding, when Hannah got married to Tommy Dunn. And she had this big wedding outside at this church up in this mountain, up in Hollywood, or I don't know, somewhere in L.A. And it was a beautiful wedding with all kinds of nice clothes. Marsha had a little black dress, and we stayed at a motel that time. Oh, I guess it was when Jonathan had his graduation, back to that, when we stayed at Lynn. And oh, no, that was a different time again. Sorry. We went to Jonathan's graduation, then went to Hannah's wedding. While we were at the wedding, this outdoor wedding, and they were performing the ceremony, all of a sudden all these helicopters and everything started showing up really close. And they were noisy. You could hardly hear the minister. And they were all hovering around. And that's when this train had crashed in Los Angeles. It killed, I think, 100 people or something like that. The guy had been texting on his stupid phone driving the train and missed a signal and went right in and got hit by another train. It was like a huge disaster. And I remember after we went up, I was with Brian, and I don't know where Marsha was driving with somebody else, went up to a party somewhere up where they had a reception for Hannah. It was a really nice reception, and I remember Brian speeding like crazy on the highway. I didn't really like the driving too good, but he knew his way around, I guess so. And then we went, another time me and Marsha decided we were going to, I got a bunch of money back from some kind of I don't know what, they hadn't been paying me my pensions properly. And they gave me about $10,000, so I bought a computer, a new computer, and then I spent the rest of the money on, we took a big holiday in the T-Bird. We decided to go on it's about a 3-week holiday. We went down to Redding, California, and then over to Santa Cruz, down through, can never remember that town. It's just out of L.A. on the beach. We down the Big Sur. I always thought the Big Sur was a flat beach, but it's all mountains down there. Marsha was freaked right out because it's all, windy road and everything. If I remember the name of that other town we stopped at, it's a famous name. But anyway, we got down to Lynn and Brian's in Los Angeles, and Hannah had been married and gone by then, and Jonathan had left, or maybe Jonathan was still there. He ended up working for Rhino Records, who handles all the Grateful Dead stuff, and Jonathan's a good artist also. But anyway, we stayed up in Hannah's bedroom, and we went out somewhere. Lynn didn't want us to drink, so I don't blame her in a way. But we were drinking in those days. But anyway, we went out somewhere for dinner or something, and then we came back to Lynn and Brian's, and they had this damn pit bull dog, and it was a horrible dog. Because the day before, when me and Marsha were there, Lynn and Brian went somewhere, and me and Marsha were sitting on that couch, and that dog jumped up on Brian's chair and sat there watching us the whole time. It was terrified of the thing. And I'd heard it had cornered Marsha once too, and it cornered Lynn. He used to think Lynn was his wife, the dog, I think, because, I heard he was always sniffing around Lynn, and I don't know, the dog used to sleep upstairs in the bedroom with Lynn and Brian, and they had, I think, a chihuahua and a cat and all this, but that dog there, we came back from a party once, and that dog jumped up and tried to bite me. It bit my shirt. And when I went to the fridge to get something, and Brian gave it heck, and then years later, I think he got it put down because it's too dangerous. Those things are unpredictable. And anyway, we went up to sleep that night. We thought, let's get out here. And after the dog tried to bite me, went up and we slept overnight, and I woke up about 4 a.m. I said, Marsha, let's get the hell out of here, and let's not even have a shower. We'll just get your clothes, pack your suitcase, I'll pack mine. And so we got ready. I got to the bedroom door, and I said, okay, you ready? Yeah, okay. Out that door, because the dog was sleeping down the hall in the damn bedroom. So we were down the stairs, out that door, and away we went. And they said later, where did you guys go so early? I said, I couldn't stay there with that damn dog. So after that, we went to Palm Springs. A lot of windmills there. I couldn't see anything in Palm Springs that impressed me, but we just sort of drove around. There didn't seem to be much of a downtown. It's mostly like a retirement community, I guess, with, golf courses and all that. So then we went out through the flats of Arizona, got some pictures of us by cactuses, all these big cactuses. They got bird holes. Birds make nests in them, I guess. And there were some neat old buildings, like old rustic cowboy buildings we seen. And then we went up through the mountains where they got these really neat rocks. There's a little town up there. I forget what it's called. We stopped there, and I seen it was actually an Indian artifact for $150 in this little store up there. But the rocks are kind of these big, huge rocks that look sort of almost like those Mayan rocks down in South America that are all pieced together. But these are natural. But there was a big axe head in there that was like a stone with, you could see where they'd wrapped the rope around or something to make it. I should have bought the damn thing. I tried to phone down there years later, or a year later, and find out about it, but I could never find where it was. Anyway, I went from there and drove along, and then we went down through this sort of a steep hill with switchbacks all the way down through this place called Jerome, where there's a haunted hotel there. It's like an old mining town up on the mountain. It's really neat there with all these old buildings, rustic buildings and hotel and stuff. And we went through there. We walked around a little bit. We should have stayed overnight there, but we didn't. You can see the whole valley down below, this beautiful view. And then we went from there through down to Sedona, which has got all the red rocks. John McCain lives there. Apparently they see a lot of UFOs around there. And we went to this place where they have a church up in the rocks, this red church, or like the red rocks. And some of the rocks looked like, like people. And then they got this, I call it Nipple Mountain. It looks like a big, sticks up with a kind of a funny little top on the thing. And then we drove around there, and we stayed actually 2 nights there in Sedona. It was so beautiful. And then we drove up through this canyon park where there's a river along its, I should know the names of these places, but it was beautiful down there. So we drove up through there, and finally we got to, where were we at? Oh, I know, we went through Gallup, New Mexico. We got into New Mexico after Sedona, I guess, and then we went to get through Gallup, and Gallup had an old hotel there. I got a folder for it if you look it up on the internet. It's a very old hotel in Gallup. I forget who owns it now. I think maybe the Native Indians own it. But anyway, all the movie stars used to stay there. Errol Flynn, James Cagney, Doris Day, everybody you can think of stayed at that hotel. And they used to make a lot of Western movies around there. John Wayne, and a lot of the rooms have names on them, and there's a big rock fireplace. It was it's made of logs, if I remember correctly. And then we went to Albuquerque after that and stayed in Albuquerque. And we went to the old town. I think I told this story before, but we went to the old town and looked around, and it was really neat there. They had these, I forget what those flowers are, those big tall flowers. With there was a lot of them growing around there, and these old adobe-style buildings, and sort of really Mexican looking, It was really Spanish, Very neat there. And then we decided to go to the museum, and we loved the food there. It was like, tortillas and all this Mexican food. And then we went to the museum and went through there, and they had a display about Billy the Kid in there. They had handwritten letters that he'd written to the governor. He was a smart guy. He was educated, People think of him as some dumb cowboy kid, but no. And the Lincoln Wars had been there, and they actually had Pat Garrett's gun that killed Billy the Kid, and they had the bed that he'd laid on, where they laid his body on, I guess, after he'd died or something. The bed was there. And anyway, all these handwritten letters. And while we were there, we seen they had a pearl-handled gun there, one of Wild Bill Hickok's guns, who's always been one of my sort of cowboy heroes. And we thought, wow. And then we thought, because we didn't really know where we were going. We were going to go to Monument Valley, and then we decided to go up to Deadwood. That's where Wild Bill's buried. So anyway, from Albuquerque, we went up to Santa Fe. I loved Santa Fe. They had a little square downtown that people sold stuff. I bought a silver pick from an Indian guy down there, and we went for breakfast down there. We had I know I told this story before in one of my early ones. We had tortillas and stuffed peppers with cheese in them, and refried beans and everything for breakfast. And we stayed 2 nights in Santa Fe because we went to the oldest church in Santa Fe. In the States, I think it's very, very old, with a hand-painted, the altar's got this big wall, all hand-painted, very old, eh? And then we went to one of the reasons we wanted to go there is the Loretto Church, where they got this spiral staircase that was built by they don't know who built it. The nuns didn't have a staircase to get up to the balcony where they wanted to have the choir, and they'd prayed and prayed and prayed, and they didn't have any money. And one day this old guy showed up on a donkey with this wood, and he built this spiral. It's got 3 twists in it, I think, to go up to the balcony, and it's got no nails and no supporting pole, nothing to support it. How it stands there, I don't know. And it had no railings. The thing is unbelievable. And this guy had built this thing, and years later, they don't even know where the wood came from. It wasn't local. And he'd built this whole thing, and he'd left, never asked for any money or nothing. They don't know who he was. Years later, they thought he was some guy from France or something, but they had to name the wood that he used. They call it the Loretto spruce, after the church name. And years later, they put railings on the church because the nuns were terrified going up it with no railings. But it really looked the best with no railings. And so we'd gone there, and we stayed 2 nights in. There's also a sort of a haunted house there or something, I heard. Then we went from Santa Fe up through this little town that's got I forget what it's called. It's got an Indian village that's famous. We didn't go into it. We sort of looked in the gate. We were on our way. We were going up to Cimarron, New Mexico, where they have the St. James Hotel. And the St. James Hotel, years later, I'd been watching TV, and when I lived in the Beach Towers, and they had Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack on, and they'd shown this hotel register of this haunted hotel where some guy had been shot there and his ghost had been in there, and there'd been people seen another little ghost of a little boy in the bar at one time, but this ghost is apparently people had seen these balls of light or something in this room and all this stuff. And this guy had been in a card game or something. He'd been shot, and it was number 18, the room, and that was his ghost. And so we wanted to go see this because the hotel registrar, when they showed it on the Unsolved Mystery, said Robert Stepp from Springer, New Mexico. And that's the same spelling as my name. So I was thrilled because there's no Stepps up in Harley in Canada. I did see a film lately of the Stepp brothers, the 4 black guys, though. But Stepps go way, way, way back. And, Moses Stepp was a frontiersman and they go way back in history to the 1635 when they landed from England. But anyway, so we went, stayed there. We stayed in the governor's room, and they had the Annie Oakley room, the Buffalo Bill room, the Clay Allison, he was a gunslinger too. And of course Wyatt Earp and his brother used to stay there. The Lincoln chef started that hotel after Lincoln was assassinated. It was like a fancy hotel off the Santa Fe Trail. People used to stop there and stay overnight. And the bullet holes are still in the ceiling. We met a guy named Dwayne Sheldon that had been in cowboy movies, and he was like a real cowboy that would go out on the range for months at a time with the cows, and he brought down the arrowheads and showed us and all this stuff. And so we stayed there for a couple of nights, or maybe just one night, I can't remember. But it was so neat, that place. We went through the museum also there, but we ended up sitting in the bar for quite a while with Dwayne Shell and drinking and talking about cowboy stuff, and he'd been in a couple of movies. And then we went up we were staying in the governor's room. I got a picture of Marsha sitting in front of the fireplace. And then we drank a bunch of wine, went down, knocked on the ghost door that they keep a padlock on, but we never seen any ghosts. They got an old roulette wheel in there. It's a neat hotel, and it's really nice. And then we drove down through this big canyon going back down from the mountain. It's up in the mountains, that place. And we went down, decided to go up to Deadwood, so we went up through Cheyenne, and it was so windy up there. In fact, they got these log things they build out in the fields for the cows to hide behind in the winter, I guess, to keep the wind off them. And we got up to, finally got to Deadwood up in the Black Hills, and they had, we got a hotel there. It was like an old hotel in a brick building. It was really nice. Deadwood, it's like a mining town, and it's mountainous around there, and steep hills. They got Boot Hill up there, and so we went up there and stopped there, and the next day, or we went to Kevin Costner's got a casino there. We went there, and Marsha won $300. And then we went down to, we looked at where Wild Bill Hickok had been killed. It's down in a basement because apparently that town burnt down once and it got built up after that, so there's not much of the original town there, but the basement downstairs is the original level where he'd actually got shot. And they got dummies are sitting around this table and a guy shooting them and that kind of stuff. And then we went over to the casino. I remember me and Marsha got in a big fight that night because she got jealous about some girls or something. That happened a lot. Every holiday we went in and got ruined somehow. She used to imagine things that weren't true. She started doing that back then a little bit, but only when she drank, it would be like, I kept always telling her, don't be jealous, Marsha. I love you. I don't want anybody else. But she would, in later years, she would start, I'll get into that later, she would imagine things that weren't happening, But that was before she went to the hospital. So anyway, we had a real nice room there, and we went up and seen Crazy Horse, that mountain, where they were carving the big statue of Crazy Horse. That's something else. That they had the head finished and the face, and they got a museum there. So we went up and looked at that. We took some pictures. Then we went to Mount Rushmore, looked at that, and that was pretty neat too. We got some pictures there to actually stand there, because my mom that been one of my mom's dreams to go to Mount Rushmore, and she'd finally made it at one time. And on our way, there was a lot of things we should have stopped at, but they're off the highway 30, 40 miles. The petrified forest, we should have stopped, went in there, where the Little Bighorn, where Custer's last stand. It's just a big flat prairie there. But one place I wish we would have went was Devil's Tower, where they did that movie, what was it, E.T.? Or no, Encounters of the Third Kind. That's a really neat-looking mountain, that thing. It's like a huge tree stump or something, only real huge. Then we went down through Sturgis after we left Deadwood, where the bikers all go. But that place is like a little town with nothing in it, because the bikers weren't there. And then we stopped at a little town somewhere, and we went down to a bar. We got a motel, went down to a bar, and I played the piano a little bit. And then we sat at the bar, and Marsha's, we're going to get something to eat. She said, "Oh, they got oysters here." I said, "Oh, they do? Out in the prairies here?" "Yeah, oysters." I look at the menu, it says prairie oysters. I said, "Oh, I don't think you want to order those, Marsha. They're bull's balls, steer's balls. And they cook them up, prairie oysters, as bad as road apples." Then we drove back through Coeur d'Alene, and we stopped at Winthrop. It's an old western town. It was really neat. That place is just fixed up like a cute little western town. And up through the Snohomish Paths. That was nice. And we saw some of the big dam down in the mountains. You can see it way down the pass. Very rugged, those mountains. Beautiful mountains. And then we came back down through, I think we stayed at the Skagit Hotel when we came back through. There's a little town, I can't remember, I should have looked up the name. It was a little town we used to stay at near Skagit Hotel, where you could smoke in it. Well, I think we were smoking. We used to smoke sometimes because we liked the American cigarettes, And I think I better take a little break here and continue.